So coming back to that flashback panel that we were talking about in the spoilers video for this chapter, where Izuku's talking to the doctor, and he's like, if you get only two or three more times, if you keep getting injured like this, you'll permanently lose the use of your arms. I don't know if this means that, like, he's going to literally lose the use of his arms, like, after this arc is over. If the series happens to continue after that point, it remains to be seen. But I'm thinking that this is more just a ticking clock for Izuku in this battle, possibly, because obviously they mention it twice. They're hammering it home that he has a serious limit on the amount of damage that he could do to his body delivering these 100% shots. Because he does, like, you know, the Detroit Smash, the Wyoming Smash, the St. Louis Smash, and the Texas Smash, which I don't think we've seen since All Might used it on the Sludge villain, like when they were in that tunnel, like back in like the first chapter. But then they're like, you know, he's in a war of attrition at this point because he couldn't take him out with the initial blow. But, you know, Shigaraki has regeneration, so he's fighting an uphill battle, and he's eventually going to lose, at least by their estimation. So I guess this is just saying that Izuku cannot continue pretty much, and that there's going to need to be some kind of intervention here. Even though Shigaraki is kind of reaching his own limit with the regeneration and the durability and everything like that, but I don't know. We're just, I don't know, more so pushing it for Izuku at this point. But anyway, we're coming to the whole Bakugo setting up this plan thing that we also talked about in the spoilers video. He's sending Endeavor up to, you know, Shigaraki to straight up, you know, grab him like Goku grabbed Raditz, and they're going to, you know, do their whole thing accordingly, which we'll get to. But the translation that we got for, you know, his little talk, Bakugo with the All Might, we're going back to that again. He's like, we're going back to the whole thing about he doesn't want to speculate, you know, referring to One for All and its origin and everything, but it's going in a different direction than I thought. He's basically saying that, like, you know, All for One inadvertently, you know, if we're looking at it literally, he did technically create One for All because he implanted the stockpiling quirk into his brother, and then they fused together and, you know, made One for All. So I guess they're trying to create the parallel that this is somewhat of inherently an evil power, even though it's technically not also at the same time. It's kind of paradoxical, but it's all about the application of it, which is, you know, what the whole narrative of this is in the chapter, because they're also going back to it when Izuku's talking to Shigaraki. You know, he's like, this power is in the way of my dream. He's like, that's what this power's for. Like, we passed this on and developed it all this time so that we had something comparable to fight against the overpoweredness that All for One has, you fool. But, you know, at the same time, All for One foolishly created his own demise at the same time. And All for One, we'll get into him at the later on. But now we're going back to Endeavor with the whole, you know, gripping him up, you know, doing the prominence burn while he's holding him. This is an awesome sequence. And man, this technically could have taken out Shigaraki if there wasn't the intervention that's going to come into here, because he is like frying him. And we already know that this was able to nuke a high-end Nomu. And I guess 75% Shigaraki is somewhat comparable to a high-end Nomu. I mean, obviously far superior, but, you know, if we're backtracking to, like, Yujiko comparing him somewhat to the USJ Nomu, at least in durability, regeneration, he doesn't have the shock absorption, but the way that he's able to take those 100% shots, reminiscent of the USJ Nomu. So, you know, one-for-one comparisons, this prominence burn, you know, point blank on him, could technically take him out, but it doesn't, because we're coming to this twist here. Now, I didn't know exactly what was happening in the spoilers because we didn't have a translation at this point, but it says, or at least All for One says, hey, why don't you hand your body over to me, Tomura? And then as soon as that happens, we see those, you know, those forcible quirk activation spike things, the cyberpunk spikes coming out of him. So does this mean what I think it does? Like, has All for One hijacked Shigaraki's body? Now, this also goes back to a video I made recently where I talk about, you know, this theory that I have where, you know, All for One's ultimate goal is to take over Shigaraki. Like, body was no longer able to keep up with the demand that his quirks, you know, the whole hardware not keeping up with the software stuff. So he found a successor, a new vessel in Shigaraki, and raised him up accordingly, all part of the master plan in order for him to take over his body. Now, of course, nothing is confirmed yet, but this just seems like he's at least hijacked it temporarily because, like, I guess he went unconscious from the prominence burn, and right before he was about to be charred, All for One slid in, like, quirk Wi-Fi or something, and like I said, temporarily took over his body. I don't think maybe he could do it permanently from a distance, because he's in Tartarus. My theory more so came into, like, he was going to do it, like, when they were face-to-face with each other or something, or at least he was going to attempt to. So another thing that makes it seem like he's completely taken him over is because of the whole, the forcible quirk activation spikes thing. Like, we saw All for One did that in Camino, and I guess now that he has taken over Shigaraki, he has more access to quirks that maybe Shigaraki didn't realize that he had at this point. Or All for One is just a veteran and more seasoned with this, these abilities and this quirk set, so he knows what to do in what certain situations that Shigaraki wouldn't necessarily be able to know, because he's like, what can I do to get out of this? But All for One's like, I know what I got to do to get out of this. And he does it because, he shoots off Endeavor with the spikes, and then we come to the big, huge trending moment where Bakugo pushes Izuku out of the way and takes the forcible quirk activation spikes through his body, through his arm, and through his stomach or solar plexus or chest. He's definitely getting wrecked by this, but another interesting thing is that it's like, at that moment, without thinking, my body simply moved on its own. This is, of course, a callback where, Izuku does the same thing to Bakugo when he's being encased by this sludge villain. So it's like he's repaying that. But also the way that this is worded, it's like a narration, almost like Bakugo's talking after the fact. Kind of like how Izuku was like narrating in the first couple chapters, like, this is the story of how I became the greatest hero. So what does that mean? Does it mean Bakugo makes it out of this? I don't know if this necessarily means that, but I do think Bakugo is going to make out of this. I don't think he's being killed by this. I would be shocked if this killed Bakugo and Bakugo died at this point in the story. Now, I'm not saying that's completely off the table at all. I think Bakugo will probably die later on if the series decides to continue after this arc. He'll sacrifice himself and all that, speculation stuff. But I think Bakugo is just going to be benched for the rest of this arc. He's obviously wounded. This is the most damage he's ever taken. And it remains to be seen how this is going to affect Izuku. He might get some Deus Ex power up from this. Maybe unlock the fourth user's quirk, possibly, from a rage boost from this or something. And then we get to see what that is. Maybe it's decay. Maybe it's not. But also, we still have Gigantomachia on the table. We still get to see how All for One is going to interact with Izuku. Maybe some revelations come to light that way. I'm not sure. We'll see what happens. I'm really looking forward to the next chapter. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments. If you like the review, guys, please give it a like. Also have a Twitch channel. Please check that out. And I have a Patreon. Check that out as well. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.